Day to all of you mothers. And it's a great day, isn't it? Are you guys happy? You guys look lethargic today. The sun is shining. It's a happy day. What, Terry?
It's not raining.
There we go. We were getting a little feedback. It's not raining. Yeah, the floodwaters came. Our roof leaked. Our laminate floor, our new laminate floor got all swollen up from the water that was ponded in our living room. That's what we woke up to yesterday. So we're thankful the rain is done. We had our share. Today we're going to talk about giving praise to God and giving praise to God appropriately. And I wonder oftentimes, do we fail to praise God for the things that He's doing in our life? Priorities are really important. They're really, really important. Before we get into the heart, the meat of our scripture this morning, we're going to talk about our theme. Our theme is the heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. Proverbs 16:9. Once again, plans are vital. I cannot emphasize this enough. We've got to make plans as a church, as a family, as individuals. We have to have plans. We cannot go through life flying by the seat of our pants. It just doesn't work that way. But we make our plans. Our plans change. That's okay. But we have to know what our plans are. And it's God who establishes our steps. We read a story this morning in class where Peter raised Dorcas or Tabitha from the dead. He did the act, but God established the steps. God blessed it, and many people came to know in God because of that event. God is the one who establishes our steps. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't here on this earth. We don't have a crystal ball. We can't tell what's going to happen when we plant certain seeds. But we have to trust that God will establish our steps, always. We have this movement of loving neighbors, getting into our neighbors' homes, getting them into our homes, getting to know our neighbors, and then moving them to loving God, getting them to worship, to fall in love with God, and then moving them and moving others to serving others. Again, we talked about this in class this morning, and how sometimes Christianity is just about doing what's right always, rolling up your sleeves and helping people, whether we like it or not. I think we're so programmed as Americans to stop doing the things that don't bring us pleasure. We're so programmed to do that. If something doesn't bring us happiness, if something doesn't bring us joy, if something doesn't bring us gratification of some kind, then just don't do it or stay away from it. And I think that's a big mistake, because I think so often, if not always, Christianity is about doing what's right to help other people, to get into the lives of other people and to sit with people and mourn with people and rejoice with people, and to help people who are in need. We've got to do this as Christians. And so today, the lesson is really on the focus when it's on ourselves. It's kind of a reverse. We talk about others all the time, but what about what's going on in our own life? When the tables have turned and things are going on in our own life, when do we give praise to God? And that's exactly what happens in this story. Jesus cleanses these 10 lepers. Now, before we get into this text, I want to talk a little bit about who lepers were. Lepers is just kind of a loose term that could describe any kind of a skin disease. It could be anything from painful boils, like what Job experienced, to just kind of different fungus and bacteria that eats at the skin. It could be any kind of skin disease, but usually kind of painful. Definitely didn't look aesthetically nice. You didn't look at a leper and be like, wow, that's attractive, that's hot. You didn't look at lepers and think that. And so lepers were typically viewed as really unclean. They were also outcasts. Because they were unclean, they couldn't just march right into the temple. They couldn't typically be employed, not by Jewish people, because if they touched anybody, that person would be unclean. And so the best thing to do with lepers was to avoid them. And so typically, lepers were not people that anybody associated with whatsoever, which meant that lepers, if you had chronic leprosy, you would be extremely poor, extremely lonely, and extremely judged. And so where do you find community when you're a leper, but with other lepers? And you kind of congregate together, and you're the group of outcasts that even if people don't say it, nobody really likes you. And so Jesus finds himself on the way to Jerusalem, starting in verse 11. He's on the way to Jerusalem, and he was passing along between Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers who stood at a distance. I think this is really important because they didn't rush up to Jesus. And I don't know if this was out of respect for Jesus, that they didn't want to come within a distance and chance touching him, making him unclean. But they stood at a distance and they lifted up their voices. They shouted out, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." The word for master, I think, is really important, and it shows their position and their respect towards Jesus. It literally meant somebody who was an owner of other people, somebody who had authority over other people as if he owned them or owned the business and they belonged to him. They're calling him master. I think that's incredibly respectful. There's no indication whatsoever that these people, these lepers, were disrespectful to Jesus. They had complete submission to him. That's clear by the text. And so they're calling out to him, "Have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priest." This is a command. In the original language, this is not a suggestion, it's a command. Go show yourselves to the priests. A pretty short statement that Luke records here. Jesus didn't converse with them. He didn't hang out with them. He didn't tell them to come closer. He didn't spit in the ground and touch their skin like he did with some of the other people who would have been unclean, the blind people. Jesus never calls them to approach him. I think that's kind of interesting. He's pretty short with them, but he gives them this one command: go and show yourselves to the priests. He doesn't say, "and the priest will make you well." Right? You would present yourself to the priest to be determined clean. They were not clean. They were full of leprosy. And so I don't know if in their own mind they just assumed that they would be healed. I think probably not. I think they just, out of respect for him, they do what they're told. And as they went, continuing in verse 14, as they went, they were cleansed. And then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. And he fell on his feet. In the words of Charles, he sucked dirt. He fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. Now he was a Samaritan. This is important for a whole number of reasons. One is that he, unlike the others, didn't continue doing what he was commanded to do. Jesus commanded them to go, show themselves to the priest. And at this point, there's kind of this internal conflict, I would imagine, because he said, go show yourself to the priest. He turned around and headed back to Jesus, kind of defying the orders of Jesus. Again, not to pick on Charles, but a few weeks ago, we talked about the conflict, or you talked about the conflict that Peter would have had, that we kind of give Peter a bad rap when he denied Jesus. But Peter really didn't know what to do in that circumstance because Jesus didn't tell him. So he was kind of left high and dry, really, in the garden. Or as you say, after the garden, in the courtyard. Kind of the same deal here. This guy was commanded to go show himself to the priest. He was healed. And then he stops And he shouts out and he's praising God. But then he does something the other 9 didn't do. He turns around, almost in defiance of Jesus' command, and he walks back. And I think, personally, this was a risky move. I really do. I think this was a risky move to turn around because he's been healed, he's been freed of this infirmity, and he's going back and he wants to give Jesus thanks. It was that important to him to go back and to give thanks to Jesus. Now, he was a Samaritan. Luke puts that in there, and I think the assumption has to be that the other 9 were not. Samaritans were not well liked by Jewish people at all. In fact, the place where Jesus was, he's passing along between Samaria and Galilee. There's a path that the Jewish people would take, a road that they would take to intentionally avoid going into Samaria. It was kind of a long route around. They could have easily gone through Samaria on their way down to Jerusalem. It would have been much shorter, but Jewish people didn't do that. They would intentionally take this path to get around Samaria because you didn't associate with Samaritans. And so when Samaritans appear in the New Testament text, it's really important. This guy's a Samaritan. He's hated by the Jewish people. He's not associated with. He's one of those. He's dirty. He's unclean. He's a half-breed. He's whatever kind of slang term you want to use. That's what he was to Jewish people. And he was the one who came back and fell on his face at Jesus' feet and gave thanks. What's interesting to me is not totally what happened here, but what happens next. And then Jesus answered, "Were not 10 cleaned or cleansed? Where are the 9? Where are the other ones? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" And he said to him, "Rise and go your way. Your faith has made you well." I think this is so important for so many reasons, because now the tables have kind of turned. The focus is on him and what he's experiencing as somebody who's been cleaned. He's been healed. Something great has happened in his life. His life dramatically reached a tipping point where his life turned around. And now he's able to associate with people. He's now clean. He's no longer an outcast. He's able to find employment. His whole life literally has changed. He, in essence, has kind of struck the lottery. And he goes back and he falls on his face and he thanks Jesus after praising God. It was a priority for him. It was that important that he go back. Knowing that Jesus is a Jew, he's a Samaritan, knowing that relationship between them, knowing that he's risking a lot, he goes back and he sucks dirt. He falls down with his nose in the dirt and he's giving thanks to Jesus. And Jesus gives him this incredible respect. Says, rise and go your way. Your faith has made you well. I wonder how often things go right in our lives and we take the position of the 9. That we just keep going in the direction that we're going in life. We keep walking. We keep doing what we're doing. Jesus said, he commanded this, and I'm being obedient to God, and that's how we justify it, right? I'm being obedient to God. I'm doing what he said, and I'm just going to keep trudging along in life. And I wonder how many people fail to give praise to God, and not just praise him, but turn back and fall down with our face in the dirt and give thanks to God. How many of us have our priorities in so many different places and we're stretched so thin and we're so busy doing this and doing that worship is kind of an option. We talk about this a lot in our family. We talk about with our kids. I was raised this way. Worship was never an option. We didn't get to pick as kids whether we showed up on Sunday morning or not, whether we liked it or not, whether it was inspirational or not, whether it was, like a great uplifting worship service or whether it was not. It didn't matter. There was consistency in giving praise to God, and that was a discipline in our life. That was a top priority, not just worship, but in every aspect of our life. And we teach our kids that the top priority, whether you like it or not, is to fall down and give praise to God, give thanks to God. Because we don't want to raise the other 9. We don't want to be the other 9 who fail to give praise and thanks to God. We don't want to prioritize things in our life. We don't want to teach our kids to prioritize things in their lives that cut God out of the picture. And we can justify it all day long and say, well, I still believe in God and I still give God praise in my own time. But do we really? Do we really fall down at the feet of Jesus and give him top priority in our lives? I think this story is so powerful and it's so important. And as we talk about moving forward as a congregation, again, making plans, we can't do it haphazardly. We can't do it guessing who's going to join in and who's not. And we've got to give God our all, period. We've got to have consistency in our lives when things go good, when things go great, heck, even when things go bad. We've got to turn back and fall down and thank God for the things he's given us in our lives. I mean, if we were to come up with a list of good and bad in our lives, quite honestly, oftentimes the bad might outweigh the good. But for the good things that are going on in our lives, do we really stop, turn around, and fall down at the feet of Jesus? Do we do it? And do we do it consistently? I hope we do. I hope that we can make a habit of praising God, of really praising God. And I mean praising God with all that we have, of shouting out. I mentioned on Easter Sunday, and I thought this was really interesting. And no, this was not a social experiment, but I said, our attitude, our position in the way that we sing sets the tone for the entire worship service. The way that we sing, the passion that we have behind the words and behind the music, the passion that we give God will set the tone for the entire worship service. If we're singing like this, right, that sets the tone for the whole worship service. If we turn around and suck dirt at the feet of Jesus, that sets the tone for everything we do in our lives, not just our worship, but everything that we do in our lives. And so it's my message, it's my hope that we go out and that we always give God our all, that we prioritize and make him first in everything that we do. And that we give him thanks over and over and over and over again. In a little bit, we're going to sing a song. We're going to give our hearts to God. We're going to sing out, open that instrument nice and wide, and sing out, give God your all. Let's go out this week, find people to bless, find people who are struggling, get into their lives and help them. Don't hesitate, don't second guess it, don't question yourself. Go out and help people who are hurting. There are plenty of people, and we want to let them know that Christ is King in our life. If there's anybody this morning who has any prayer needs or anybody who has not yet taken the step to put Christ on a baptism and would like to do that, we invite you to come up as we all stand and sing a song together. Eric.